All right, here we are at episode 8 of the Dev Space. And you can see here we have a guest with me today. This is Caden Roots. It's good to have you here, Caden. Sitting
Cool.
in,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, you're taking Anton's place, so that's some big shoes to fill today.
Always. Always.
But it's interesting because that's sort of Caden's professional job right now is learning to fill Anton's shoes.
Yeah.
As you know, we've mentioned in previous podcasts that Anton and I work together at a company, and Caden works with us. And Caden is beyond a junior now. I call him an up and coming developer because he started as a junior. He already had experience and passion, and then over the last, how long has it been? 4 years now?
Yeah. Coming up on
Yeah.
four.
Yeah, 4 years of the journey of seeing, how you've thrown yourself in so many different ways. And so Anton was going to be away this week, taking a much needed break. And we said, you know what? It would be great to get you on the podcast. So he and I discussed some topics, and we arrived at this idea of just what is it like for a up and coming developer to come into this dev space, right?
Mm,
Which,
mm.
Anton and I both, started when computers were still, very, very basic, right? And in a certain sense, it allows us an advantage because we got to see, these very advanced things develop from very, very simple things. My first
Mm.
computer didn't even have a mouse. But
Oh, wow.
I'm just wondering, your experience all the way through, we have a couple different questions we'll go through today, but it's good to have you here, man. It's been exciting working with you, and I'm interested to hear your point of view.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Um, yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I can't believe, yeah, 2nd of November, we're coming up on 4 years. And wow, what an amount of knowledge that I've learned and consumed, working with you, working with Anton. So it's been great. I wouldn't change it for the world. Um, it's definitely been a very interesting process.
Yeah.
I obviously I took IT as a subject in school,
Hmm.
but growing up learning IT in a country like South Africa, where the infrastructure isn't really tailored yet to the development space of IT and children that are interested in the subject. So
Right.
it's really lacking in that sort of framework. But where the South African Education Department lacks in that, the internet makes up for it in so many different ways. I mean,
Yes.
that's probably one of the greatest things about having, Google and just having a free open internet is you
Yes.
have so much information and resources at your fingertips. Um, and I think
That's
especially
right.
for IT, I think it's probably one of the easiest, if you tailor for it and you have the aptitude for it, it's probably one of the easiest markets to get into and teach yourself because again, there's just so many resources out there.
Yeah, I was gonna underline that the importance of the self-learning, right? And the self-motivation.
Yeah.
If that is an ingredient, which I said from the first time I met you, the first week, you have that in spades. If that
Yeah.
not everybody, I think that's a rare quality. Some people I think can't take that advantage of all of that sea of information, and it's some, so I just want to say that I appreciate that you've been able to find a way through that and deliver at work, professionally, all the way
Mm.
from testing to writing code in, now more than one language, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I started off with Delphi in school, and I never thought I'd use that language, and actually to this day, I still haven't really used it. But I think
You
that's the
won't.
joy of I won't exactly, but I think that's the joy of learning coding and development is even if you learn 10 different languages, there's always a root to all of them that is universal. So
Yes.
you can, if you learn the foundations and the basics, you'll be able to pick up on any language.
Yeah, because it's sort of learning. I say this too, in Code Plant, the sort of little academy I have to train junior coders. I say this a lot that coding at this stage, I mean, with AI, it might change in the future, but at this stage, it's sort of like learning
Mm,
how to think like the computer thinks, which is
yeah,
not very flexibly. It's like if you can learn to think inflexibly, then
yeah,
and you're right, then whether it's Python or JavaScript or TypeScript or C++, all of them have that same sort of inflexibility. And I think that's the hardest part to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah.
The human brain is not a logic machine. Like,
Mm,
it's logical, it's reason, it does reason, but a computer is a machine.
mm,
And, it's like that is a bit of training. Some people's brain run from that. In the first levels of computer science, they teach them to write in C, which
yeah.
is a very verbose, dense language, very finicky, and you have to manage so
Mm,
many concerns just to get something simple going. You have to manage memory and inputs and outputs and all this buses, and they do it to stretch you. So I think that was a good thing that they did for Delphi, right? In that you
mm.
might not use Delphi, but Delphi was probably harder to learn than JavaScript.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I went through 3 years of it in school of learning Delphi, and by the end of it, I still was sort of scratching my head. Whereas I then, after school, I did a 3-month course in JavaScript, and I was already writing functional components for an application.
Yes.
So, but then again, with that, I took the foundational learnings of Delphi, you know, programmatic thinking and
Mhm.
algorithms, and
Right.
translating that over to a new language. And that process actually made it so much easier. So I think for anyone coming up into the space, just really focus on the foundation and you can go anywhere from there.
Hmm. Yes, I mean, and it's interesting uh, that with all of the information and all of the pathways to learn, coding,
Mm,
there's still frustrations, right? So maybe you can tell me or tell us about any frustrations that you've hit along the way, because sometimes how you get past those frustrations is very helpful for others. There might be somebody else
yeah.
sitting there stuck at the same place.
So I think, for me, there were two main highlights, frustration highlights, right? The
Hmm.
first one sort of ties into what I said about how great it is to learn IT.
Hmm.
Having so much information at your fingertips, that can also be a downside. It can also become very overwhelming, if you're
Right.
going into the space for the first time, not really knowing when to start. There are so many YouTube channels with everyone trying to teach you the foundations and the basics. There's so many free courses. So, for someone that's coming in, you don't really know where to start. That can be very overwhelming.
Yeah,
So
and
it
just
really does help.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you
Okay.
off. No, just
That's
on that
okay.
on that point that once you start digging into those any thread there too, you realize that there's like four camps that are all fighting about the best way to do it anyway. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
so yeah, it is kind of overwhelming. I can imagine it's like, okay, there's guys that are saying use these frameworks in JavaScript, and there's guys that are
Yeah.
saying just do vanilla JavaScript. And as a young developer, it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, like who do I trust? Right. And that's where
Yeah.
maybe the reason I've seen you grow so much, as a developer and your competence, maybe is because you have that, but you also have this real world team where you could observe sort of best
Mm,
practices in a practical way, right? Like not on a,
yeah.
Wikipedia page or, not in a coding tutorial, but like,
Mm,
like from a, developer like Anton that we all learn from where, he explains it and you go, oh, ah, I would
yeah.
never have read that, off of just text.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah. So on that point, um, that also ties into all these resources that are available. It will never beat practical experience.
Hmm.
I mentioned that I started and that I did that 3-month JavaScript course, but then once I completed that and then I actually started applying it to real world scenarios,
Hmm.
my seniors immediately started telling me, listen, the way that you're doing this is so outdated. We haven't used this method in 3 years. This is how you're actually supposed to do it. So,
Sure.
you can still have all this information available, but it's not always up to date. So then, you
Right.
know, probably the best way that you're ever going to learn in this space is, if you find yourself a mentor or someone
Hmm.
that you trust and that has that knowledge, and just find someone to do some skills transfer with you.
Yes.
Practical experience is always going to be the best experience.
Right on. I mean, I
Um,
so agree with you. I mean, no matter what industry, but
mm,
particularly in this industry, right, where
yeah,
there's just so much you have to, you said consume, I think earlier at the beginning, which I like that word because it just like, it is like that. It's like
yeah,
this, like, you really need to pack it in.
Yeah. And then going on to just like my second point with learning, is one
Yes.
thing that I really only started noticing this year after doing, coding for over 3 years. If you are learning from a mentor, it is very, very important that you distinguish yourself as a developer and what type of developer you want to be.
Hmm.
Very early in my career, I found that, instead of writing code, I was sort of copying code. I
Hmm.
wasn't writing code and tackling problems how I would tackle them. I was thinking, how would Anton do this, and sort of copy his method, or
Right.
follow your method and copy that. And
Yep.
that's not going to get you much further in life either. No one really wants a copy developer. They want a developer that can stand on their own 2 feet and come with their own solutions and problem solving skills. So,
Hmm.
along with distinguishing what resources you need, it's also very important that early on you figure out who you are, what type of developer you want to be, what space you want to go into, and really just finding your niche and your way of doing things.
Yeah, that is such a good point. That's another thing that I always try to talk to the younger kids about, the flexibility of the coding, as a skill, it can go in so many different directions. I've met guys who make their living coding scripts for drones for the medical industry, and guys
Mm,
who are, writing code that goes inside of the Sansa space station, satellite. It's like
yeah.
it's like, and that's going to increase like over time, right?
Mm,
So we just talked a little bit about the frustrations and maybe the roadblocks and some tips, but I know what keeps us going as developers is those moments where things click and they all come together, right? And it's like, maybe it's just a simple test that you've been trying for a couple hours and you finally get it right, and you're like, yes, there's a dopamine rush there that keeps you
yeah.
going, and chasing that dragon. So maybe describe one of those that you've had recently or in the last 3 years, just something where you just like it came together.
Well, so speaking on the topic a little bit about, finding your niche and where you want to go into, I really started my coding journey, as a front-end developer,
Hmm.
working on the UI and all the components that you see and interact with. And that's been really great. But I didn't really feel that that was the space that I wanted to stay in, long term. So recently I've started venturing into the backend space.
Hmm.
Learning some Node.js, learning how to configure a server and connect to,
Hmm.
MongoDB. And so recently I've been working on this barcode food scan app.
Yes.
You just scan a barcode on a food item, and then it's going to give you all the information of the ingredients and the calories and the sugar content, etc. Um, that was quite a challenge because it wasn't just building the UI and making it look nice. It was also, building a semi backend layer, connecting to an API to pull food information from. First time working with a camera component. So there was a whole bunch of moving parts that,
Hmm.
at first it was very overwhelming because you don't really
Sure.
know where to start when you have so many moving things.
That's right.
Um, that took me probably, it would have taken someone like Anton maybe a day or two to be able to do that. Whereas for me, it was about 3 weeks of effort.
Yeah.
Because it was researching and doing mock components and this and that. But that
Yeah.
feeling of that final version one,
Hmm.
and scanning about 5 6 different food products and all of them coming back with their information correctly, that was probably the highlights.
Yes.
Nothing really beats like sitting down, like doing the hard work and the labor and then actually seeing it pay off, and having it then now going into a position where it integrates into a larger application
Hmm.
that can contribute to a company's success. That's probably the best feeling ever.
Yes. I mean, that's so great. And one of the things it just highlights as you were talking, that the way that you came into the team, I mean, like if you started even in a smaller company or maybe just as a single developer, you wouldn't have been exposed
Mm,
to the way that this uh, was sort of maybe the simplest way to put it is there's engineering on this, even in the things that in a lot of areas, somebody will build a front end and not use a framework, not really use a state management system. They'll just build an HTML front end, right? Because it's
yeah.
easy, quick, right? but we've
Yeah.
done it in sort of a best practice, very engineering centered way, where we're using all these
Yeah.
frameworks and tools. So even when you came in as a front end developer, you came in sort of second tier, because a lot of front end developers are
Mm,
still working in HTML and JavaScript. They're writing
mm,
just really HTML5 front ends. But now you work with React, and TypeScript and Redux. You're thinking like an
mm,
engineer. And then that's
yeah.
why I think you're able to now look at the back end, because the back end is much more
Yeah.
engineering
No,
than
definitely.
its concepts are a lot simpler. There's not less
Mm,
interactivity. You have more control, but you have so much more, around that you have to manage
mm.
as an engineer. Anton's always teaching me this. It's like, okay, it might work if you have 5 records in the database, but if you have 5 million, is it going to work?
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly.
Those sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because we always talk in this podcast a little bit about AI and how it's impacting the dev space, our own
Mm.
workflows. So yeah, how would you say, as an up and coming developer, how have you experienced AI in some way? I know there's a lot of debate around, is AI helpful for somebody at the level, because as somebody at my level, I look at it like it's going to give me 80% correct code, and it's bitten me,
Yeah.
even in my latest professional project, I tried to rush with AI, and it bit me a bit, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think it's at a state. It will be probably very quickly, but it's not at a state where, for me, it's like, it hasn't replaced the intelligence of having somebody like you on the team, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, from your point of view, how have you used it? How have you experienced it?
Yeah. I mean, I think we started this year sort of all of us still experimenting a little bit with like how does AI work? How can it integrate into our development workflow? Is it actually going to be beneficial or not?
Mhm.
And we're now at the end of October, so we're 10 months down the line, and I use it every single day
Yeah.
in my workflows.
Hmm.
It's so useful, especially for someone that is learning in the space. Again, when we spoke about resources earlier, right now, as it stands, AI is probably one of the best resources a
Hmm.
young junior developer can use to learn. Um,
Yes.
if I did not have my senior developers at my disposal on a day to day, ChatGPT or OpenAI, is sort of like second best to that. If I
Hmm.
have any questions, it's very detailed in its answers, especially if you have the paid version. Quickly spinning up a simple React application to get you started and get going with the rest of your project. I mean, it saves you a half a day's efforts to get a basic app going for
Hmm.
your R&D. So, I think it's been absolutely super beneficial. Again, it's never going to, maybe not never, but at least for the next couple of years, it still cannot replace that human interaction, because it's still not going to give you 100% accurate code that is going to run perfectly every single time on the first try. So you still need that human intervention to, but suss it out, check for the errors, and a human's logic and perception is always going to be above it, I think.
Yep.
But
Yeah. I,
yeah, it's been great.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I talked a bit more from like yeah, I would say currently I use it to figure out things more than I use it to actually write code. I sometimes, if it's
Mm,
grunt work, like, like I had a task today where I had like this really long JSON file, and I really didn't feel like writing a script to filter it, and so that kind of grunt work where I don't have to think, the AI can do
yeah,
great. But
yeah,
most of the time, the harder problems, it doesn't, like you said, you can get down a rabbit hole of it not getting it right, and you don't know it didn't get it right, and you lose a bit of time. Rather
yeah,
than, at that point, it's like I try to use it as a resource to help me learn how to get it right. Right. So
yeah,
I find myself pasting the documentation sometimes from, the URLs to documentations in, and having a chat about like what I'm trying to accomplish, rather than, so I think some people are still thinking of it almost like a little coding slave, where it's like all I have to do is say 3 sentences and then sit back.
Yeah.
It's not like that.
No.
I don't know that it'll ever get there. In our careers, maybe in the next 20 years or so. But I just, for right
Mm.
now, I feel like there's still a big, yeah, unless they come out with a new approach. Right now, these things are language based, but who knows? They might come out with new models. The Transformer's only been around for, 15 years or so. The
Yeah.
concept, the math behind it was invented in the 60s, but the actual, paper that came up with a model that we call now the large language model transformer, it's only been less than 20 years. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with your point of using it in a conversation context. That was one of the parts that, again, that bit me in the butt a little bit earlier this year as well, where also, I found myself treating it like a little mini developer slave,
Hmm.
and really just expecting it to crank out high level accurate code, and that I could just copy and paste that into the app and it would work.
Right.
But over the last like 2-3 months, I've sort of adapted to learning how it responds back.
Yes.
And now I use it sort of in the same context as you. So, I'll take some documentation that might not make a lot of sense, paste it in, and then I have a conversation with the AI and say, okay, this is the documentation. This is what I want to achieve. Help me out here. And then, go through a few iterations of prompts. And then, I 9 out of 10 times I'll come out on top with what I actually wanted to get out of the conversation. So it's been hugely beneficial,
Mm.
especially from the learning
Yeah.
perspective as well. I've learned so much about connecting to external APIs and connecting to a database, and how to write even
Yeah.
Python scripts as well. I'm slowly
Hmm.
picking up on small aspects of different languages just
That's right.
because I have such an amazing, powerful tool at my fingertips. So it's been
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
really great to use. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's great because I do think you might be on that lucky cusp of where, AI came as you already started had a base of skill and understanding. Even if it was just, a medium level skill, it's like now you
Mm,
can dig in and you know at least what to ask, right? But I'm just
yeah.
wondering about like there's a sort of de-technical, or I don't even know what the term de-technifying, like, or making people less technical. Technology
Yeah.
increases, right? So that people can
Mm,
use it with less technical ways,
yeah.
and that creates a bit of a skills gap that I mean, I guess the goal is that AI will fill that skills gap eventually, but
Yeah.
interesting times. So, yeah,
No,
well,
definitely. Yeah.
one more thing to just sound off on before we close off is as you've come so far in your journey, is there anything you've picked up, any sort of tip that you want to pass on to other developers that yeah you picked up on the road?
Yeah. One thing always stands out to me if I get asked this question or something similar is patience. You're
Mm,
you're not going to build a multi-million dollar application on your first try. You're not going to successfully connect to a MongoDB on your first try. There's a lot of things that you're not going to get done and get right on your first try unless you're just super, super lucky, or you are like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or someone. But even those guys went through their own iterations of trying things
exactly.
over and over again. Um, so,
Yeah.
I think that's just my tip is just, be patient with yourself, be patient with the process. Learning comes with time, it comes with age. And, you really just, if you have a love for the industry and for development and for what you do, then, having patience will get you so far in life.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a good rich tip too, because it's so applicable. There's so many times where I'm just thinking that I was so frustrated with the computer. I came up with my own
Yeah.
slogan. My catchphrase was computers are stupid because they don't think, but they're getting smarter every day, so that's good.
100%. Yeah.
Well, Caden, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, just as much as it's a pleasure working with you. And I look forward to again seeing you on here. Maybe next time we'll bring you on and maybe have a three-way chat on a topic and maybe even have you demo some stuff too.
Mm,
Because I think one of the ideas we'd like to get into is to also have a platform to start showing and talking about things on a bit more technical level too. So yes, thank you
mm.
for this discussion around your learnings. And yeah, just be encouraged. I think you're on the right path.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for being a great mentor. It's been a pleasure working with you so far. And yeah, just thanks for everything. It's been great.
Cheers. Have a great day.
Cheers.